Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tena Mam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Our subject today is meditation, also called as Nididhyāsana. But this word is not used that commonly in Vedanta. The word that is kind of more or better known is dhyana, meaning meditation. But it's also good to know grammatically, the word nididhyāsana and dhyana, they both come from the same root. And so the way this word nididhyāsana gets formulated, there is the prefix called ni, which means something done with determination. And the other would mean a repeated doing it, a great desire to keep on doing it. So the word nididhyāsana would mean a little bit more than simply just state meditation. It means a determined effort to keep on meditating over and over again. So sometimes as we launch on a very serious spiritual life or a journey, sometimes the question would be, are there any steps to it? Are there any stages that we pass through? And in Vedantic tradition, they very broadly say there are 3 steps. First is called Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyāsana, meaning hearing, reflection, and meditation. If you remember, we had looked at the first 2 steps on in earlier satsangs. Even if you don't remember, I'll summarize it again. So it's hearing and reflection. And then what we will focus on a little bit more detail today is the 3rd step of meditation. Now, corresponding to these 3 steps, they also say that there are 3 kinds of students, or 3 levels of students, if you like. So the topmost category of students are called in Sanskrit Uttama, the best, the magnificent, if you like. And on the other end, those who are still in the beginning, still struggling, in Sanskrit they call them as Kanishtha. Rather uncharitably would mean the lowest, but we can say who are striving. There used to be a time when they referred to some parts of the world as undeveloped world. And nowadays they find that's not politically correct. They say the developing world. So these are like developing students. And everyone else in the middle of these 2 extremities, they are called the middlings, the Madhyama. Now, where any of us belongs is really we have to figure it out. Sometimes we are very quick at judging other people. We don't have to do that in Vedanta practice. We just have to judge ourselves, where we. Now, luckily for us, it's somewhat easy to know to which category of students we belong to. And one test is that hearing, the first step. And what these ancient books say is that as soon as the teacher gives the instruction, tells that highest truth, and sometimes in non-dualistic circle that would mean Tattvamasi, you are that infinite one. So that's like the definitive statement. Now, if the student belong a part of the highest category of students, at once the student will get it and then realize, I'm the infinite one. Nothing more needs to be done. No spiritual practice, no nothing, no more lectures, retreats, nothing. The teacher says something, the student gets it. And sometimes we've seen that even as students when we were students then, and we still continue to be students of life, but we know that when we were in high school or in different stages of our education period, we see that sometimes if you're studying some intricate subject, and there are some who just get it immediately. They don't need too much explanation. And so these highest category of students are like that. Now, so that's Shravana, hearing. And hearing is something that we all do. But hearing, why is it a practice? It's a practice because hearing is an art. Hearing doesn't simply mean just the sound waves coming and going inside and I'm able to hear the sound. That's the kind of a very biological process. But hearing as a spiritual activity would mean that when I'm hearing, I'm not doing anything else. And that's difficult. That's the difficult part. Because we are so programmed to react to everything happening around us. So when we are hearing something, we are not simply hearing. We are also reacting. What is this sound? Does this sound same as what I heard yesterday? Or you hear in a lecture and then you say, does it make sense? Maybe the other day I read in a book something else. So we are simultaneously reacting to what we hear. And that's a problem because the mind at any given moment can do only one thing. So when I hear something and I start thinking about it, I'm missing something of what is coming next. And so hearing therefore needs to be practiced. Now clearly, not everything that needs to be heard with so much attention. Just like newspapers, for instance, or you're reading about news. That's important, but it's not something like I must pay attention to it so much that I need to keep it in my heart all the time. No, every kind of news. Olden days, when people used to still read printed newspapers, people would say that newspapers are a kind of a most ordinary form of literature. Within 24 hours, it gets outdated. Nowadays, we don't have to wait for 24 hours because we just read stuff online. Within 5 minutes, it just gets outdated when something else comes. So that kind of a hearing could be something we just need to know and not hold it. But there are certain things that just can't come in and go out. So when we hear the words of the scripture, the words of the teacher, then that needs to be heard in a proper way. And so hearing is an art and something that is, especially in spiritual life, needs to be practiced well. Now, what they say is that when we hear from the teacher or study from scripture, and hearing doesn't simply mean here literally hearing, it could mean reading from a book, study, all of that will come because even when we read something, we are still hearing the words on the paper in our heads. Sometimes we just carry on a longer conversation just with our own minds. You're going to go for an interview or meet someone, we kind of recreate that conversation in our mind. So hearing goes on in a very subtle way in our heads as well. Now what they say is that if we hear well, then a lot of times the doubts regarding the source of knowledge get resolved to a greater degree. For instance, the first step of hearing will resolve some of the doubts I might have about, for instance, the study of a scripture. Does it make sense? Why is a scripture a source of knowledge? How should I study it? What's the right way to study it? What's the wrong way to do it? So doubts regarding that get resolved through hearing. What doesn't sometimes get resolved is doubts about the object of knowledge. So as soon as the teacher gives the instruction, the best category of student get it, they are enlightened right away. And if we haven't been enlightened yet, in spite of coming to Vedanta and reading and hearing about it for such a long time, one thing is conclusively known, that probably we are not the best category of students. But maybe we are somewhere in the middle. And those are the kind of students where they don't get immediately enlightened after hearing about this truth from the scriptures, but what it gives rise to are questions and doubts in mind. And that's something that's true for all of us. When we hear something new, questions come, doubts come in our mind. And in order to resolve those questions and doubts, we need to reflect on it. That's what takes us to the second step. Now, reflection, just like hearing, is also an art. And in order for us to reflect well, we must cultivate some kind of a stability of the mind. By stability, I mean, think about it this way. If for your birthday gift, if someone gives you a new machine or some gadget, and you know it's something valuable, you know it's precious, but you still don't know how it works. So what we'll do is, we don't simply, any gift, whether you know about it or not, people like to receive gifts. But sometimes you get a gift and say, how does it work? And so you then take it home, you look at it from every angle. If you're not able to figure out, you read the manual. But we then study it well, and then we know how to operate that gadget. Something similar would happen with regard to the ideas and thoughts and concepts that we learn from scriptures. Not everything needs to make sense immediately. But when we hear it, we can kind of bring it home. And bringing it home would be like bringing it in our heart and then studying it. Now, in order to study it well, we need to kind of look at it from every angle. Now, that's the difficult part. If our mind hasn't learned the art of holding on to an idea and examining it from different angles, it becomes very difficult. And that's why disciplining of the mind is important. Because sometimes we see that many of us have lots of ideas, but not the ability to hold on to an idea for a sufficient length of time. We just kind of keep on hopping from one idea to the next and bouncing ideas. It's nice. Of course, bouncing ideas is fine. But at some point, we need to hold at least to say one idea and say, let me just hold on to it and learn more about it. Learn about it in depth. Now, if we don't have that, develop that capacity to do so, even meditation can become difficult. Because oftentimes, when we learn to meditate or try to meditate, oftentimes it means holding on to say one form or the sound of the mantra, the sound of your prayer, the form of the object of your meditation, the Ishta, the chosen deity, the chosen form. Now, if I have gotten accustomed, if my mind has gotten accustomed to just hopping from one idea to the next, then that's what my mind will do even when I try to pray and meditate. And when we say that, my mind is restless or I feel distracted, it's nothing but the kind of a bad habit the mind has developed of not holding on to one thing. Sometimes you'll see, sometimes children will do that. Sometimes you give child a toy to play, and not all children, but many of them, after some time they just get bored. And so then you have to give them another one. And so sometimes parents will give 15 different toys with the hope that something might interest this child, and then they will let me be free to do other things. And that's true. I mean, it's kind of good to have choice. But if you have like 15 toys, and then it's so easy to like pick up one, throw it away, and pick up another, and throw it away. Then we try to do exactly the same thing with regard to the ideas and thoughts that come to mind. Hold on to something, throw it away. Hold on to something, throw it away. So reflection would mean kind of retraining the mind to say, okay, all ideas are important. But at this moment, at any given time, hold on to one idea and reflect on it. So when we then try to reflect that way, the kind of doubts we have, kind of questions we have. For instance, often we learn in religious literature that God is our father, God is our mother, the eternal father, the eternal mother. And then a question can come. What does God being my father or mother mean? How is God the Father different from my biological parents? How can I develop love? Because normally the experience of love that we have in life is usually with someone or something I have seen. So how can I love God whom I have never seen? Is God simply an object of my imagination, something that my mind has to just think about? Or is God as real and tangible a being, a presence, like the world that I see around me? So these kind of questions, we need to come to terms with them, come to try to have some idea about it. And that is possible only through reflection. So these ideas and the questions we have, sometimes in Sanskrit they call it asambhavana, means the apparent impossibility of resolving some of these questions that come. Now it's possible that once the mind is trained to reflect well, many or most of these doubts will be resolved. Then those who are the middling students, once those doubts are resolved, they will be enlightened. Then they don't even need to go to the third step. But sometimes what happens is, even though intellectually many of our questions and doubts may seem to be resolved, and we might say, I've read all these things, I don't have any doubt about it. And yet, I might find I'm still not enlightened. And the reason for that is that although intellectually I may not have any doubts, something more sinister, if you like, is blocking my path. In Sanskrit, they call it viparita bhavana. Viparita bhavana means completely contrary experience. In other words, for instance, we talk so much all the time here about I'm being the Atman, and the body and the mind and the ego being layers over it. And for most, that seems to make sense. There is this material layers over me, and within that is the spirit. So intellectually, emotionally, it makes perfect sense. But it makes sense, but still, as I go about my day-to-day activity, I still think of myself as this being. That my experience as spirit hasn't come yet. Though understanding and acceptance, intellectual acceptance is there, experience hasn't come. And it is for this third challenge, third difficulty, the third obstacle, that we need this third step, and that is meditation. Now, if we have heard the truth, reflected on it, and still haven't become enlightened yet, then it's a very humbling experience. Humbling knowledge is, I'm probably a mediocre student. And there's nothing to feel bad about it. That's just where we are. But the good idea, good to know that none of these categories were kind of carved in stone. It's not as if, I'm a mediocre, all my life and through eternity I'm going to remain mediocre. No, that's not what is meant. That right now, this is where I am now, but I can that's why all these practices that we have seen over the last few months about discernment, non-attachment, restraining the mind, restraining the senses, forbearance, concentration, all of these practices are really meant to then lift me from whichever level I am at present, to refine my understanding, to take me to a higher and higher level. And so, what does meditation therefore mean? Meditation, what we need to do is that, while reflection is dealing with ideas and concepts, now meditation, we still need to continue doing that and refine our ability to reflect. But then the third step requires to go beyond simply reflection. And that is, at some stage, or at least while we are meditating, we need to go beyond the thoughts and ideas and concepts. So And this is an important point. Meditation on the divine, meditation on God, is not the same as thinking of God. Because thinking involves ideas, concepts, truths. But meditation means seeing the divine, seeing God. And what it really means in practice, therefore, is that can I at least, even if I'm not able to eliminate all thoughts and ideas from my mind, can I at least learn to hold on to one thought and one idea, which I referred to before? And oftentimes, in the case of most students, that would mean the sound of my mantra, the teaching given by my guru, that repeat this mantra. And that mantra repeating, even if you do it mentally, we are hearing the mantra in our heart. So there is this hearing part of it. Sound, that one sound. Even if my ear hears all other sounds, can I not react to them? The only sound I need to hold on to is the sound of the mantra. And the only form I need to hold on to is the form of my Ishta, the form of the object of my meditation. Now, those of us who meditate generally kind of see meditation as an activity that can be done. Most of us trying to do it at least twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening. And so meditation tends to be something that has a beginning, has an end, sometimes done several times in a day. But Nididhyāsana gives us a little bit a nuanced understanding of what meditation is. And that is not looking upon meditation as something that starts and ends, that's something that needs to be done several times. Can we see meditation as a continuous activity, an activity that never stops? So that brings us to the distinction sometimes that's helpful to make between doing and being. Is meditation something to be done, or is meditative awareness something to have as my default state of being? Because doing anything requires time, it requires some investment of energy, and we know we grapple with these tensions because all of us have a bunch of things to do, and then we decide we have kind of our self-made schedule and routine. This is what I'm going to do in the morning, this is what I'm going to do in the evening, this is the amount of time I can allot to this activity, and so on. Because all of doing requires time, requires energy, requires schedule. But being doesn't need that. Doing is bound by time. Being is timeless. Now, we are human beings. I think so. At least tentatively, before we go to saying we are the spirit. Now, we don't have a schedule for being a human being, because that's who we are. We don't say, oh, morning 2 hours I'm going to be a human being and evening 2 hours. We don't do that. And what's interesting is that all of the doing I do, I can do it while being a human being. So my being a human being does not conflict, doesn't come in the way of whatever things I have to do. Now, if it's possible to be a human being and do all those things, then can I be a meditative being? Can I be a divine being? Can I be a spirit and do all the things that I need to do? And that's the challenge. So meditation, therefore, can be seen not in terms of just repeating a mantra or visualizing a deity, and all of those things are important, but primarily as a search. it's a continuous search. It's like when you, I think many years ago, maybe several decades ago, there was this movie called "It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World." If you remember that. So, and what's fascinating about, of course, they hear about some treasure buried somewhere, and all are just they just forget everything else, and that's what they're thinking about all the time. Even when they are engaged in the other activities that need to be taken care of, they never forget that's that buried treasure I want to go to. Something like that should happen in a spiritual life. Yes, we have duties, we have responsibilities, we have things to take care of. But if I truly believe that God realization is the goal of my life, or being enlightened, being spiritually free, or moksha, whichever way you think of nirvana, whichever way we think about that highest goal, can I keep that goal always shining in some corner of my heart, so that no matter what I am busy doing, no matter how important these other things are, I never let go of that goal. Now, in order for that to happen, my mind must be convinced that's a goal worth striving for, that's something really I need. And so simply reading from a book that God realization is the goal, moksha is the goal, is not enough. But books will say 100 things. But am I convinced about it? Do I really feel that way? And if I feel that's important, I'll never forget it. And so, let me just put it this way. I spoke about people going for buried treasures and searching for it. Now, the search that we do in spiritual life is an internal search. Sometimes you might have, those of us who have read Swami Vivekananda's books, we know that a big chunk of his life before he came to the West was what they often call the wandering years. In Sanskrit, the word is parivrajaka or parivrajana. Now, that really means wandering. And oftentimes, many of these monastics of course, in Indian subcontinent, but in other parts also, they didn't want to kind of get attached to a single place or a single this thing, and they just kept on moving. And in India, it often meant these people in search of God would go from one place of pilgrimage to another, and that's what they would keep on moving all the time. And that's good. But never for a moment should a Vedanta student think that it's all about wandering in the external world. The real wandering is in the internal world. Now, in order for me to even enter the internal world, the bonds that tie me, the bonds that hold me, the bonds that tie me to this material world need to be loosened a little bit. I mean, how can I go inside if I'm just being pulled outside all the time? And so there has to be a little bit of loosening of the hold of the material world upon us to give us the freedom to go inside. Because it's like this, whatever I see as real will draw my whole being to it. Whatever I see as not real, it's easy for me to dismiss it. And to some extent in our daily lives, we do that all the time with dreams and waking world. If there is a fire somewhere, of course we are affected by it, especially if that fire is something that's directly impacting our lives. But sometimes we might dream about a fire in a dream. And then in the dream, of course, we are affected by it. But when we wake up, we don't then agonize or say, oh, it was just a dream. What a terrible dream it was, but it's gone. We don't lose our sleep over a fire that occurred in my dream, because it's easy to dismiss the dream because I know it's not real. But I cannot dismiss the things that happen in the waking world as easily, as quickly. So that which is real draws my whole being to it. And the reason we have often distractions during our meditation is because the mind has determined that what's happening into this world is more real compared to this kind of an imaginary thing that's going on in my heart. That's a problem. So what we need first is to first convince ourselves, at least intellectually, and then going beyond that, is that what's happening right in my heart is at least as real as what's happening out in the world. And later on we might see this is much more real. That what's happening outside is so perishable, but what's happening here, the what is here is the real truth. And when that awareness comes, then holding the mind to that divine becomes a little bit easier. It becomes more meaningful because that's real. Now, among the distractions that occur, clearly there are, of course, distractions about what I need to do yesterday, what happened yesterday, what's happening tomorrow. Those are distractions very obviously. But there are also more subtle distractions. For instance, the idea, the question is, how long do I have to meditate? And sometimes this question can come while we are meditating. Oh, should I now get up? Should I just continue for another 5 minutes, or 10 minutes? Or how long? When will I realize God? So this when is a distraction. Time, when I'm meditating, and if I'm thinking about, why am I not seeing the Lord yet? That's a distraction. Results is a distraction. Because we do read about these great saints and mystics. Oh, these are the visions they saw. This is what they saw. This is what they saw. And of course, it's natural to feel, I hope I get to see some of those things when I meditate. But while I'm meditating, if I'm constantly saying, why am I not seeing something? I hope something happens. That's a distraction. So when I'm searching for the truth in my heart, I should just be searching. Not thinking about when I will realize God, not thinking about what I will see or what I will not see. I'll be just searching. And that would be being. So breathing, for instance. We all the time say, oh, I've got to do this today, I've got to do that today. But there's something we have been doing right from the moment we were born, and that is breathing. And we don't ever want to stop doing that. Like someone was celebrating his 100th birthday, and someone said, what's the secret of your long life? He said, just keep breathing. Don't ever stop. But we don't ever think, oh, I've got to finish this task, I have to do work in the garden, I've got to do this, I've also got to breathe. So breathing is not something we feel. It's an activity, of course it's an activity, but we don't see breathing as something we have to do. We just see ourselves as creatures who breathe. So although we are doing something, we are breathing, it's become so much a part of our life that it no longer feels an action or it requires something that requires time. It's something that's happening. Now Nididhyāsana would be that state of mind. That when I'm not thinking that, oh, now I have to meditate now I'm not. I'm just a being who is in continuous search of God. That would be the state of Nididhyāsana. When that, sometimes we will see that this kind of spontaneity this happens, for instance, in any pursuit of art, that as long as I feel I'm doing something, we might still do great, whether it's music or painting or writing. When I'm doing something with the awareness, I'm doing it, probably our best creativity may not emerge then. But the best thing occurs when this I gets out of the way. And that's the time some amazing pieces of music or writing or painting or sculpture will come when I'm not even feeling I'm doing it. And that's something can be a part of our meditative awareness. Not that I'm meditating, I'm doing meditation, but that's just who I am. And that's the kind of when our kind of ordinary meditation will get converted into Nididhyāsana. In other words, meditation is something that should not end when I get up from my meditation seat. That if I'm meditating, and it's very helpful, we have to have some time, at least once, but twice is better, or even more if we can, sitting and praying, or whichever way we pray, but kind of a very obvious way we generally tend to pray and meditate. But the challenge is when our meditation ends, when our prayer time ends, what happens after that? And the Nididhyāsana would mean that my meditation does not end when I get up from my meditation seat. That yes, a few minutes or half an hour, I'm sitting and meditating before an altar or before wherever I meditate. But then I get up, then I'm walking. I'm meditating while I'm walking. I'm cleaning my room, I'm cooking, I'm writing, I am going for a walk. I'm meditating while I'm doing all of these things. Just like I'm breathing all the time, I should be all continually a part of me in search of the truth, in search of God within. That is when it becomes a Nididhyāsana. So all of these 4 basic practices that we have seen over the last several months, when we say practice, it obviously means something to be practiced. But a time will come, a time should come, when none of these things need to be practiced consciously. So, discernment, yes, in the beginning we have to do it consciously, but at some point my mind should get so trained that that becomes my default way of looking, understanding at anything I do all the time. Non-attachment, yes, is something I have to practice, but I should reach that state when I wouldn't be able to get attached even if I tried. The Gita describes about a tortoise, immediately at the first sense of danger, it just withdraws itself and goes under the shell. Now, if I'm trained that way, then the moment I realize something which is unhealthy, something which is not good, something which is an obstacle in whatever goal I have set before myself, I don't have to consciously withdraw it. Instinctively I'll withdraw from it. Forbearance, such an important quality, becomes a default way of living. I don't have to consciously, no grumbling, no nothing, just accept. Yes, this is the reality. Moment we know when we are doing it, it neutralizes the pain and suffering that comes if I'm established in that quality of forbearance. Then similarly, concentration, deep faith, Shraddha. So all of these practices at some point should stop being practices, should become the person that I am. So those are no longer the things that need to be done. Those are the things who I am. And that's what Nididhyāsana would be. Now, I said meditation is a kind of search. And any search will end one day. And similarly, Nididhyāsana as well. When we are searching for that truth, that search will end one day. Maybe in the beginning, it could go in bits and pieces. Maybe the force of our past mental impression, samskaras, are so strong. Maybe in spite of my best effort, my mind might still get drawn outside. But maybe, perhaps, while I couldn't or wouldn't be able to hold my mind on that highest level for say even 5 seconds, maybe with repeated effort and not getting discouraged by any failure, I might be able to say, Well, I can hold it for about 10 seconds, which is good. And if I keep on trying it, maybe I can hold it for a minute or 5 minutes. That's how it begins. In bits and pieces, little victories, plenty of failures, not getting discouraged by it. Every time we fall down, get up and start marching. And eventually we find that all distractions vanish. So these 3 steps might seem to follow one after the other. And in the beginning, yes, of course, we hear about the truth, then we start reflecting about it, and then we start meditating on it. But in practice, all of these 3 steps kind of, after a while, go concurrently. So we keep on reading, we keep on hearing, we keep on reflecting on it, and we simultaneously keep doing our search. And when this state reaches, as I said, when doing becomes transformed into being, then we have already graduated from being a mediocre students or middling students or whichever level we were in to being the magnificent ones, the highest category of students. But once we reach that state, what do we have to do then? Nothing much. Because we have already, what needs to be done has been done. We just have, now we are what we wanted to do. And then, as they say, we just hear and then turn our gaze eastward and we see the sun is about to rise. And that's all that needs to be done. So all of the spiritual struggle, Swami Brahmananda once said, definition of spiritual life is struggle, struggle, struggle. 3 words, struggle. So if we are struggling, we are in good company. Everyone who is practicing spiritual life is struggling. But that struggle will end. And when that will end when I am the truth that I am struggling for. And that's what needs to be understood in terms of meditation. So hearing, reflection, meditation. And try to think about some of these ideas as you continue your own spiritual life. There is a lot, no 2 lives are exactly identical. There is no a fixed blueprint for everyone. But these are the broad outlines through which our life can move ahead. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu.